Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for new stories from Yellow Cat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet, and let's get started. Employees, how did you fire your bosses? Part 5. My old boss wasn't good at managing people, but he was great at selling things. Think of Michael Scott, but without the quirks. People had to be at work at least an hour early to clock in, but he would often get there 15 minutes early and leave after only 5 hours of work. I'd been writing this down for months and telling his boss about it, but nothing worked. He finally crashed his car. The next day, he looked up new trucks on his phone, and the next day, he bought a car at his state. I could see his requests for paid time off because I was in charge of making schedules. He said he was in the building from 7:30 a.m. to 8:15 p.m., but none were made. Cameras caught him coming in at 8:50 and leaving at 9:05, which is after the store manager got there late. According to company policy, there had to be 2 workers in the store at all times when the doors were open. I told his boss about everything, and a month later, my boss quit all of a sudden because he found a new job. The best part was that he was investigated for time clock fraud and found to have worked negative 168 hours instead of plus 142 hours as he had said. This meant that he tried to steal 2 months of salary from the company in a way that could be proven. For the last month he worked, he didn't get paid by the company because he needed to square things up. When I said goodbye for good, the first thing he said was, "I wish I had never met you or hired you. You are the one thing I regret most in my whole life." When I left that company for a small family-owned one, that's when I really got mad at this guy. The person who used to be my boss called my new boss without any warning. She told him to wait a second and then asked me if this D was my old boss. When I said yes, she called him back and said, "I will not do business with you no matter what company you're with." She then hung up, fired him twice in 4 months. I worked in retail many years ago with a terrible boss. In front of other employees, she called them ugly, she was racist, she was rude, she lied, and she used racist language about job applicants. During the busy Christmas season, she lied on our time cards to make it look like our store hadn't gone over budget on employee hours. She made us sign them or she would take us off the schedule. She worked her way up to become an area manager. Even though she wasn't my direct boss anymore, I decided I didn't want to deal with her anymore. I quit right before Christmas. I could have ripped them off because I was one of the most experienced workers at that store and had the most sales, but I gave them 2 weeks' notice because I liked my store manager at the time. New Year's Eve was my last day. I wrote a letter to our main office a few weeks after I left. I wrote down a list of things she had been doing that were either against store policy or against labor laws. The district manager I wrote the letter to called me and asked me more about my experiences. She then told me she would be in the city in a month and asked me to get together as many current and former employees who wanted to talk to her. On a Sunday morning, about 20 of us showed up at her hotel. There were so many of us that she had to talk to us in small groups. Sounds like everyone had a lot of bad things to say, but I never really got to hear what the other groups had to say. The DM went back to headquarters to get ready to fire the area manager. The area manager had to take a medical leave of absence for 2 months, which was a shame. But a week after she got back, the DM came back to the city and fired her. The area manager attempted to file a lawsuit or a grievance with the labor board, something like that, for being fired without cause, but she lost because headquarters had proof that she had done something wrong. I later learned that the DM didn't really like my area manager and had her doubts about what kind of person and leader she was. But until I wrote her a letter and met with a lot of current and former staff, she didn't have enough proof to do anything. I have no idea what happened to the area manager who used to work here. Also, that was decades ago. The last time I heard, she was divorced and couldn't find work. I was an assistant manager at Dollar General for about a year. As an assistant, I should have had at least 32 hours on my schedule so that I could keep my full-time benefits. For a while, my boss kept scheduling me for less than that because of the budget, so I talked to the DM about adding some more hours. She gave me a 2-week job at another store because theirs was having trouble and their stock was growing. 4 people were sent to help set up and run the store. Anyway, I was able to work full-time and get extra hours. I looked at my pay stub online the following week. I only had 40 hours. It should have been a lot more with OT, so I told my boss about it. She told me that her store couldn't afford it. She got mad at me when I told her that my pay wouldn't come from her store, but the store where I was working. They talked to my boss about it and told me I would get paid next week. I talked to the person in charge of the crew and the DM. That's why I had to wait until the following week. I don't know what she was thinking because you can't make changes to next week's budget. You have to call the payroll department and inform them of the change. 3 weeks had passed and I finally called corporate. They talked to all of her employees as part of an investigation. She was fired in the end. I said nope when she asked me to become manager. While they were looking into it, I gave them 2 weeks' notice. I was moved to a different store 3 weeks ago. It's not cool. I'm not going to work for DG again because they messed me up twice. The first time, when I was a real manager, I was supposed to go to training for a week, but never did. I also had to hire the daughter of my old boss who didn't do anything and talked crap about me to everyone else who worked there. It was because she wanted me to leave so she could become manager. At the fast food place where I work, the mac and cheese that's microwaved is pretty well known for its customers. It's pretty clear that my boss never taught me how to run the line and would just leave me to it. It's a surprise when orders take forever because I'm cooking by myself, even though I've cooked or worked in fast food before. I have to run to the back to get ingredients that should have been ready before I got there, and I have to deal with cranky Karens by myself. One day my boss's boss comes in and there's just her and me working. My boss is in her car playing with her phone, and it's just her and me doing everything. I had never had a break while I was working there, and my boss's boss could tell I didn't really know what I was doing, so she and my boss talked about it afterward. After that, the 2020 thing happened, and I and a lot of my coworkers stopped getting hours or even being scheduled. I talked to her about it, and she told me to just file for unemployment. I don't know why, but I called HR and caused a bit of trouble on the company Twitter until someone called me. I found out that my boss had an infinite number of hours that she could have given to me and my coworkers, but she was only given her favorites hours while everyone else was at home without pay for about a month. I don't know what happened, but my new boss called me and said that I would now have hours, that I had finally been properly trained, and that I enjoy my job more than before. I'm not sure if it was because I complained so much about my old boss, but she was fired, and thank God for that, because before she was fired, only 4 people were working, but now everyone has great hours and morale has definitely gone up since then. Residents of a terrible HOA, or those who have terrible neighbors, share your stories. Part 5. More than 7 years ago, I started my journey into Association H with a small fund that owners had donated to. It wasn't part of our dues, but it was managed by a committee led by the board president. The board pretty much said not our problem every time the money was brought up after the president quit and refused to do anything with it. She finally bought some junk we couldn't use, had it shipped directly to us, and said that was all the money she had, but she wouldn't give us a receipt. As an accountant, that made me mad, so I started going through all the meetings minutes and found several places where she mentioned different amounts that had been donated. When I told the board what I had found, the current treasurer and I got into a heated argument during which she said there is no way to account for cash. As an accountant, I knew right then that there was an even bigger problem, so I started looking into it again and again gathered evidence that board members and their friends were getting perks at the expense of the association. People were already upset about the original fund and very angry about the association's terrible financial situation, the bad handling of our dues, and the lack of maintenance that the association was supposed to do. But as soon as I started talking about the information I had, it was like a switch had been flipped. People were mad at me behind closed doors, but in public, I was the bad guy. It got so bad that people were harassing and threatening me and destroying my property. In the end, I sued several of them and got restraining orders against them. Once I did that, people started to say, yeah, the board may be doing something wrong, harassment, not following the bylaws, embezzlement, etc., but hiring an attorney and suing you is just costing us money. This was true, even though I filed the lawsuit because of the harassment and put it on hold to try to work out the problems. I wasn't asking for money in the suit, I was asking the directors to do their job, but I was still seen as the problem. One of the weirdest things is we learned that because of the previous lawsuits that the association lost because they were clearly in the wrong, our insurance went from $1,200 a year to $18,000, and the deductible went from $2,500 to $75,000. Those numbers are not typos, and no one batted an eye over that. They were just peed I was going to cost them $75,000. It's still crazy. How in the H do people not care that the board was so screwed up that they lost multiple lawsuits trying to hide what they were doing when rates and deductibles went up that much? In the 3 to 4 years that followed, a lot of crap happened before I finally settled. It cost them and their insurance company a lot more than the $75,000 deductible. They paid me off, and I got to keep the money for my kids' college. Plus, the insurance company raised the deductible to $150,000 and the premium to $34,000. They will only cover accidents, and if the board is sued and the insurance company says it was because they failed to do their job, the association will have to pay. But going back to the money problems, nothing was ever done. The few people I still talk to tell me that things are even worse now. They say that people have sold because they're afraid to make a fuss after seeing how I was treated. A new board's chosen, but the old ones get rid of the new ones and put their friends in their place so nothing changes. My story is very bad, and the board might be the worst of the worst. When my lawyer and I first talked on the phone, he told me that my association seemed to bring in the worst people and act like it was its own kingdom where the law doesn't apply. He wasn't wrong. If I knew then what I know now, I would still go the same way. The only thing I would change is to send everyone copies of the paper trail at the start. Maybe they would have stood by me and done the right thing. Last year, after more than 3 years of regular HOA issues, an association contractor arrived at my house one morning to plastic off 2 doors and utilities in preparation for some rain, keeping everything dry until repairs were made. All right, if they had informed me beforehand. Rather, my puppy, who was still very young and unaccustomed to such things, was terrified to see ladders and laborers on my property at 9 in the morning. I had to go home, console my dog, cancel the dog sitter, who still needed to be paid, stop working, losing money as a contractor myself, and realize that I wouldn't have access to my laundry for 5 days. The contractors informed me they were responding to a last-minute request from the board president and showed empathy for my issues. Regarding the continuous lack of notice to residents, I sent an email to our community manager. I had the entire day to react, but decided not to. The board members' addresses and private phone numbers are not disclosed, so I looked them up some time ago and decided to use them. I rang the bell at the president's front door at 4 p.m. Not a response. I returned at 6. I would have returned at 8 if he hadn't opened the door at that moment. I identified myself and started out by describing the problem. To his credit, he made an effort to let us know that he and his wife are going to leave and asked if we could talk tomorrow. I refused and remained still. I questioned him about the incident of the day and all the previous issues for more than 10 minutes. I didn't insult him, make any physical gestures, threaten him, or speak louder. I spoke only the facts and maintained a composed but obviously angry demeanor. He tried to justify himself to the community manager, so I called him on my phone to show him how fast calls go through and that I had both his address and phone number. Again, the board doesn't advertise this in my neighborhood. He was obviously more uneasy after that. I doubt that he had ever encountered anything comparable. After acknowledging my correctness, he eventually left. We lived close enough together that I heard his wife yelling at him as they left a few minutes later. It seems that she took offense when irate neighbors showed up at their house. The community manager was replaced after the board contemplated changing the management company as a whole within a span of 2 months. To ensure that we're notified of any work orders as soon as they're open, they also added a homeowner portal. Since then, they have greatly increased their communication with the homeowners. It only took for them to realize that I was only one of more than 250 residents and that something similar could occur again. Just ask yourself, how often do you want angry neighbors showing up unannounced at your home? If you want to watch the part 4, click the link here. We're very, very glad to see you all in the comments again. Many thanks for your support.